Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our South Grandma Water and Sewer Authority Finance Committee meeting. Today is, March the 15th. And so I want to call this meeting to order, and we'll begin with our staff introductions for the record.
Well, very good, and thank you very much. So for the record, Scott Schroyer, Executive Director. We have Mark Hamlet here, our Engineering Director, and Richard Vollmer, our Finance Director, and Crystal Lee, our Board Secretary, off camera this morning. So thank you very much. Welcome to our March 16th, 2023, 9 a.m. Finance Committee meeting this morning. So members, you have the agenda in front of you. You also have an agenda booklet, and you have a printout for a capital improvement sheet. So we will get to that in just a moment. So looking at our agenda this morning, you see our FY 23-24 proposed budget review topics. We'll get into those in just a moment. I would like to just jump back to our previous meeting that we held in February in the Finance Committee to discuss our budget, just to cover a couple of the topics that we discussed that are reflected in what you'll see today as far as the budget message and also the budget ordinance. So if you recall, one of the discussions that we had at our previous meeting on February 23rd was in reference to the 401k program for the employees, where previously we were offering a 1%. That's what we did in our last year's budget. And there was discussion about changing that based on the participation to 2% in the budget. So we have made that correction in our budget this year. Also, there was a discussion about our budget ordinance in terms of the, just get to the right page here, Section 3, which discussed the Executive Director's authority to reallocate appropriations between line items. We were at a $2,500 limit at that point. There was a proposal to upgrade that to $10,000. And you will see that reflected in the changes today, the documents that you have in front of you. So before I move on, I'll ask Richard. Richard, was there anything else that we made adjustments on besides those two items, or were we pretty much static?
I think the rest was static.
Okay, very good. Any questions or comments from the Finance Committee members on what I just discussed?
No questions.
No? Okay. Very good. So let's turn to our next item, which is the budget message and budget ordinance. And you will find that in your booklet beginning on page 5. So this is the fiscal year 2023-24 budget message. This message sits on top of basically the budget package as far as the budget ordinance. And you can see that based on our previous meeting and discussion, when you look at the revenues, we've actually captured our water revenue projections as far as the increase of $400,000 compared to fiscal year 22-23. The next item, we see our sewer revenue projections were increased by $650,000 compared to FY 22-23. Our capital revenue will fund utility infrastructure asset depreciation at 90%, and that's static compared to what we were doing last year as well. And the near-term goal with a footnote is to increase this value to 100%. Just to note that the fee categories were reviewed, expanded, and updated as necessary to reflect actual cost of service. We will be looking at that later in the agenda today. I have a summary sheet of the changes that were made, and I also have the complete document attached in here as far as a red line version so that we could dive into that should the board choose to do that. Looking at our payroll and benefits section, again, coming out of the last meeting, no positions are being added at this time for this budget. We have a 5% wage schedule adjustment that's proposed, an average performance merit increase of 3% for employees based on merit pay ranging from 0 to 4%. That was the same as our current fiscal year budget. And then you can see that we have some increases in the local government employee retirement system. Also an increase in 10% to medical and dental premiums and 5% to vision premiums. And then, as indicated previously, a matching 401k contribution increased to 2%. Committee members, any comments or questions regarding that?
None for me.
Not at this time.
Okay. Taking a look at the expenses and the capital outlay at the bottom of the page. Again, something we talked about previously, but wanted to identify obviously in the budget message that we've had significant increases in supply costs, fuel costs, and chemical costs due to inflationary factors. We are proposing replacing or purchasing equipment totaling $96,225 and software of $155,000. And that software really reflects the finance utility billing software that we discussed at the previous meeting. We have some scheduled large utility repairs totaling $185,500. Completion of a project for hazardous chemical removal at the water treatment plant. And then we've also included $2.3 million for depreciation expense, and that's funded at the 90%, and that's our asset depreciation goal. And this budget also will include $117,843 for the annual maintenance agreements on all water towers. So any questions or comments about anything that we covered on this page?
So some of these numbers are different from the ones we had in February.
They shouldn't be too much different in comparison, correct, Richard?
Those numbers should be the same.
Under payroll and benefits, the February ordinance had 2%, and the new one is 5%. That's one thing that jumped off the page at me immediately.
You may be looking at, if you're looking at last month, be sure you're looking at the 23-24, because there was a 22-23
Okay,
for
you're
comparative
right.
purposes.
I'm sorry.
that had
Thank
to-
you, Richard.
I think you're
All right,
looking at the
I feel
wrong
better
year.
now.
Right, so nothing on there changed, as Scott said, other than the matching 401k contribution that the finance committee directed us to increase
Excellent.
that to 2%.
I was on the wrong page. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, our next item, and I'll let Richard cover this next item. This is our annual budget ordinance for fiscal year 23-24. So this is on page 6. So Richard, would you lead us through this, please?
Sure, we went through the budget ordinance in pretty good detail the first meeting, so I won't go through the whole thing again. But just to reiterate, we basically have the same numbers. You will see that the budget expenses due to that 2% increased about $615 from the first meeting to this meeting. I think we decided in the first meeting, or the finance committee directed us in the first meeting to increase it to 2% and maybe consider 50% participation versus 100%. And so that's what we did, and that resulted in about a $615 somewhere in that area increase in expenditures. Otherwise, everything stayed the same. We're basically increasing, as Scott mentioned in the executive summary, the revenue increases are $400,000 for water, $650,000 for sewer. And of course, there's $96,225 for capital outlay built into the budget. The total revenue and financing sources is $15,289,655. So are the expenditures. You see the distribution to the various departments, and that contrasts to the first meeting we had was $15,289,040. So again, about a $600 increase. And you'll see that, again, we're still budgeting to appropriate no fund balance. So this is a balanced budget with no fund balance use. And that's really it for the numbers. In section 3, there was some discussion at the first meeting about ways to expand the executive director's authority to do interdepartmental transfers of budget. Originally, as you recall, the amount was $2,500. There was some discussion about increasing his maximum of $10,000. So in section 3, we did a few revisions and a few tweaks based on some LGC guidance from a template we used. And it basically reads, the executive director shall have the authority to reallocate appropriations between line items except for salary and benefits within a department up to a maximum of $10,000. Such reappropriations must be reported like other reappropriations and reported at a subsequent board of directors meeting after the funds are moved. All transfers must be in accordance with North Carolina general statutes. The executive director shall not have the authority, any authority to appropriate fund balance or to increase total appropriations. The finance director shall establish and maintain all financial records which are in accordance with the ordinance and in accordance with appropriate state statutes of the state of North Carolina. So that's really the only change in the ordinance other than the $615 change from the original.
And with that proposed change, as Richard mentioned, we thought it was a good time just to expand a little bit on the explanation from previous explanations in budget ordinances, kind of tighten it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
Does the executive director have discretionary spending? Or is this the only spending he's allowed? Like city managers are allowed to have discretionary spending up to $25,000 or $30,000 without board approval.
And that's what this is doing, is
Just
kind of mirroring
line to line.
that city county manager verbiage. The only thing is the limit here is 10,000 versus what and some counties have unlimited
Right.
manager authority.
Okay, I didn't know if this covered that, but it does.
It
Okay.
does, interdepartment. I will make one note that one thing Scott and I discussed, and we didn't
Try
put in
it,
here,
Scott,
is
Richard
that-
will stop you at the door.
is that it says interdepartment, and
Yeah.
some counties have even expanded it now to where managers can move things between departments, just not between funds.
Okay.
Ours right now is restricted to within the department.
Okay.
And just another note, there's a companion piece that the board approved several years ago to increase my purchasing authority from $10,000 to $30,000.
Okay.
So it's not really discretionary, but it's within board approval
Right.
to make those.
So we don't have to call an extra emergency meeting.
Right, and then there was also supplementary legislation that talked about emergency appropriations up to $90,000 with provisions in there as far as how to communicate back to the board and what's required, those type of things, so.
Very good.
Any further questions or comments regarding what we just covered?
That's it.
No?
No? Okay. Very good. So the next item we're going to, it says, is a review of our proposed changes to the schedule of rates, fees, and charges. And so looking at page 9, so let me just start off by saying that I think the Finance Committee recalls last year we went through a very complex project to bring all of our schedules together into one manual. And there's a lot of definitions in the rates and fees and charges booklet that we have. And it really delineates everything that we have. Well, of course, based on inflationary factors, for example, we go back through and we look at everything that we're doing within that book as far as rates and charges. We are having a change in our rate tables. That's something that's reflected in this booklet as well. So we always try to ensure that our business practices and what we're doing in the field align with what the costs that are being charged out there to our customers to cover our costs for that. And as the Finance Committee may recall, it had been several years since we did that true up, so that's why we did that project last year. The piece that we're going to be looking at today is a companion piece to our budget. So last year, during the budget approval, the board also approved the rates, fees, and schedules as part of the budget. So again, this year, the board will see as part of their budget package the budget we just talked about in terms of the cover letter from the executive director, the budget ordinance, the rates, fees, and charges booklet will be part of that, and we'll get to later on in this meeting the capital improvement program sheet, which will be included in the budget. So that's going to be our budget package this year, and you'll see that in years in front of us as well. That's going to be our budget package moving through.
Okay.
Okay. So contained behind page 9 is a very comprehensive red line underscore revision of all the changes that we're proposing to the FY 23-24 schedule of rates, fees, and charges. And what I've done for you on page 9 is I've given you a summary table just so that you can see through the 6 items, the section title, the section items, the page, the item, and an update explanation as to what was happening there. So we are more than happy to, once we cover this table, dive into any section specifically. We can go page by page if you'd like to in the rates and fees. You're more than welcome to do that. But again, this is kind of our highlights here. So if you're comfortable, I'll just start right here with this table with item 1 and 2, because they're really kind of companion pieces. These are our water rates and fees and our sewer rates and fees. And as you're aware that we had water-based charges and water volume charges, and also sewer-based charges and sewer volume charges that are changed to reflect on the new model that we're using and what we're incorporating into this budget. So for example, on item 1, page 4 and 5, tables 1 and 2, the rates have been updated to reflect the updated rate model. And we have similar updates for item 2, which are sewer rates and fees. Again, tables 5 and 6 on pages 7 and 8, and these are rates updated to reflect the updated rate model. Item 3, excuse me, is the schedule of tap charges and fees. This is section 6.1, water service and meter installation fee on page 18, table 22. These rates were updated to reflect inflationary costs associated with this item. So if you'd like me to pause, if you want to take a look at those same pages, I'd be happy to do that. I don't want to move too fast here, but how about if we look at page 18 together? Something looks a little amiss here. Section 6.1.
Page 18 of the actual fee sheet.
Of the fee sheet, I
Yeah, not the
apologize.
rate.
So that would be,
Yeah.
Page
I'm like, wait a
27.
minute, I think I missed something here. What
Yeah, I was
page-
doing that in
What page
myself.
was that,
I was like,
Mark?
oh no, that's
Page
not-
27.
Page
on the red
27,
number.
thank you.
Like 18 looks real good.
Okay, so, this is an example of our water service and meter installation fees. And this is something that Mark manages for us as well. So Mark, is there anything that you want to say specific to any of the information found in that table?
I'll just touch on how we calculate these numbers.
Okay.
We went over this last year when we first put this together, but I worked with our collections and distribution staff, and we came up with an hourly estimate for how long it takes for our crews to actually make these taps and installations. So we've got the actual labor costs associated with this. We also have the cost of materials, meter boxes, the water meter itself, the lids and so forth, and then we have our equipment cost. So, you know, if we have to excavate a hole to install a water meter, we need our backhoe on site. So we quantified or calculated what it would take in labor, materials, and equipment, and this reflects the actual cost of that. So this is not SGWASA making money, this is what it costs us to make this installation.
Okay.
With a cost accounting background, I'm glad you did this. Because that's the only way to set a price. You
Exactly.
really have to figure out how much it really costs.
Okay.
So does this cover just the cost? Is there any wiggle room for inflation? Is there any
This is actual cost.
Okay.
Rounded
round?
to a whole number,
Okay.
basically. But I did not include inflation, any additional inflation in this. I mean,
Okay, let's move on to the next item, then item 4, schedule of engineering charges and fees, which is on page 21 of the fee schedule, but page 30 in our booklet here this morning. So Mark, I'll also have you explain that as well.
So we implemented a plan review fee last year, set a base charge for a review, and then, so it was previously, I believe it was $1,000 would cover up to 3,000 linear feet of water or sewer lines. And then we had a price per foot for additional review beyond that. And just after seeing that for a year, I decided that I thought we could up that number from 3,000 feet to 5,000 feet to better reflect what it actually takes in labor costs for us to perform those reviews. So that's the change here, went from 3,000 to 5,000.
Okay.
Okay, and just a couple pages behind that, page 32 of your agenda book, let's focus on item 5 on the summary, which is a schedule of miscellaneous charges and fees. 8.3 miscellaneous program service fees, new section added to address third-party services and associated fees. So if you look at page 32, the top page, portion of the page, you will see 8.3 miscellaneous program service fees. So this is a new item added to this booklet here. And as the board is aware, we're getting more and more into contractual managed services with companies. One example is the online utility pay system, right?
That's correct.
A second one coming up is going to be our backflow program management. So we thought it was appropriate to at least have a paragraph in here regarding that. So we've added that section here which reads, SGWASA partners with many third-party service providers to provide efficient utility services. Often the service providers charge a nominal transaction fee for services provided. The third-party service provider fees are subject to change. The third-party service provider charges are established and maintained in approved contracts. These fees are typically a direct transaction between the provider and customer, thus are not considered SGWASA fees as governed by this rate and fee schedule. Okay, so we thought it was important to add that section there for clarity in case there are some questions in the future by board members or the public as to, well, who's approved these fees,
Right.
this pass-through, if you will. So, and again, we set up contracts with these providers, so they are contained within those contracts that are approved by SGWASA. Any questions, comments, or concerns regarding that?
No, I think it's a great idea to include that.
Explains it.
On that same page, the next item down, 8.4, industrial pretreatment program fees. This is a new section added in the corresponding tables for the program management and inspections related to significant industrial users and non-significant industrial users. Mark, do you want to cover this at all?
So this, yeah, as our director said, this is a brand new section. Our wastewater treatment plant staff deals with the permitting of industrial pretreatment, that program. And these fees just, so if someone were to build a new industrial facility here, there's a fee for us to, or a permit fee that they must pay to be able to tie to the system. We have to go out and we have to test what the discharge is, because industrial facilities have a different type of waste than a typical residence or commercial property. So we have to go out throughout the year, perform inspections. We have to sample and test to make sure they're within the limits that our treatment plant can actually handle. So that's what these fees are. They represent that program for permitting a new industrial facility and us sampling and testing the waste.
Now, we don't have many of these users out there within our system, but again, we recognized this last year when we had a permit renewal come up, that we didn't have a section in the book to address that. So we actually obviously want to have that to be board approved as well as far as our rate and fee schedule moving forward.
Okay. And what's the difference between significant versus non-significant?
It's based on the industrial byproduct that's being put into our system,
Okay.
basically as far as a classification of hazardous chemicals and how they have to step those down potentially for pre-treatment to come into our system.
Okay. Thank you.
So those 6 items that we discussed this morning are really the major updates that were done across the booklet here that you have. There was some wordsmithing done as well, especially when it centers on the rates for water and sewer, because we no longer have a minimum 2,000 gallons associated with the base fee, so we cleaned some of that up. So, Richard, is there anything that you would like to discuss in this booklet? Any noted changes?
No, I think we covered all the ones.
Okay. Mark, anything that you would like to add?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. What we will do following this meeting is commit all these changes to final to have a new booklet that comes out. So that will be presented as a companion piece again to our budget coming up.
Did we have to update our accounting system for codes for these new fees?
We will have to restructure our billing system when we implement it. Should the board pass the rate schedule with tiers, then yes, we will have to reset.
Is that something that can be done in-house?
Yes.
Okay.
We have already confirmed when we brought the tiered system to the board for approval that our software can handle it and that we can handle it between the July and August billing cycle
Good.
internally.
So you won't have to wait for the new software to do this?
No. Now, it will take effect just like any other rate change would with the August bills, which is July usage.
Okay.
All right, very good. We will move on to the next item, which is a review of proposed capital improvement program, our CIP. So in your booklet, there's a placeholder for this on page 33, just to keep up to speed with what's going on here. So Mark is going to lead us in a review of the CIP, and we have at your desktop a schedule of CIP program summary for spanning the next 10 years. So Mark, why don't you start off by giving us an overview of what we have down the left-hand side as far as projects and what we're reading across as far as the columns as well, the summary sheet, and then you can speak about each program area if you would like, and then we will just kind of launch into some Q&A by the committee members, okay?
Okay, so this 11 by 17 sheet shows a 10-year capital improvement plan, something that SGWASA has not had in the past. On the left side, the left column, you see several different categories. These are areas, primary areas that we focus on. We've got the water treatment facility, water distribution system, wastewater treatment facility, water towers, wastewater collection system, lift stations and force mains, and then at the bottom you see non-designated capital improvement project funding. That non-designated CIP is the I-85 project. That's being funded from a completely different funding source, so that's shown separately. The next two columns list out various projects that fall into each of these categories. You can see there's numbers, like the very first number says 101-01. When I first started working on this about a year ago, each one of these broad categories I gave a number to. So water treatment facility was 101 and water distribution was 102 and so forth. And then each project I identified, I gave it the next dash, 01, 02, 03 number. So there's actually a lot more projects that I have identified that we need to do, but of course funding is not infinite and we have to really scale back what we want to try to do. So the next column, the third column, shows the names of the projects. We can run through those in a moment, but I'll just continue going across the columns and explain what we have. Then the next 10 columns show the anticipated spending for each of these projects over the next 10 fiscal years. So with the upcoming 23-24 budget, that first column is for next year's anticipated spending for the project, and then the very last column is the 10-year total for each of these projects. We can run through the projects a little bit in detail, and then at the bottom we can talk about what all these numbers at the bottom is the summary. So under the water treatment facility, so I met in development of this list of projects. We have some asset inventory data that was performed from grants that we received in the past. We had a sewer AIA that was performed in 2019, where I used that data to identify wastewater collection system projects. Based on that AIA study, they assigned criticality rankings and condition assessments for all of the sewer lines throughout our system. And using that data, I was able to define numerous projects, and I think we identified around 40 or 50 that need to be done. And you can see in the wastewater collection system, there's like 5 or 6 of those there where it says sewer project area A, area A1 or A2 or so forth. For the water treatment plant and wastewater treatment plant facility, I met with the superintendents and we reviewed what the needs were at the plants and tried to prioritize that a little bit. So with the water treatment plant facility, we've got a master plan for that site. Is one project. You're well aware of the most recent upgrade, but as I've talked about at our board meetings, I think about 50% of the plant has been upgraded. The rest of the plant is original, 80 years old. So we want to perform a master plan on that plant to try to figure out the best way to utilize the property we have to upgrade the plant to where it needs to be over the next 10 or so years. We've got technology upgrades with SCADA. That's software that needs to be upgraded every 3 to 5 years. And we're showing upgrades on that in 5-year increments. And then the exterior of the plant, we've got some concrete rehab on the outside of the plant that needs to be greatly improved. So we've targeted spending some money there to rehab the exterior. For the water distribution system, we do not have a current AIA. asset inventory assessment for the water lines for our distribution system. However, we do have a grant that's approved. We're about to start on that project now. But I was able to identify a handful of projects with our collections and distribution staff for what they felt the highest priorities were. So I've got 3 of those projects here. I'm also showing under the water distribution, I've got just a baseline for a water line replacement program, and then also a water line cleaning and lining program. So for the first year, I'm showing $250,000 going into each of those programs. That is just, so the water line replacement, that's just $250,000 that we can spend to replace water lines that we determine may need that. Not a defined project at this time, but that's just allocating money to replace water lines. The water line cleaning and lining, same thing, that's $250,000 that we can go in, clean the lines and put a liner in those. In some cases, that's something that we want to do with some of our old cast iron lines. You may not need to actually dig those up and replace. We can just clean those and put a liner in those, and that can really extend the life of those. But that's, we don't have a defined project or defined water line to do that on right now, but we do want to allocate money towards that. The next category is...
Excuse me, could we pause just for a moment on that? So I think what's something I want to bring to the board's attention here is that we spend a lot of time talking about funding depreciation, 90% versus 100%. You start to see how this really comes into play now, because really what we need to do as a utility is invest that depreciation money back into our system, so we're constantly upgrading our utility system, okay? Without a schedule such as you have in front of us here, we don't really have a roadmap as far as what we need to do. When Mark talked about criticality and condition, this is really important, because in order for us to spend our limited dollars, we want to spend those in the correct place to replace the water line or the sewer line that needs it most. We don't want to just go out and spend money. We want to spend it in the right place. So when Mark talks about doing these condition assessments, these are very important, and that's what drives this schedule, as well as our depreciation money that we put back into here. So this is, I just wanted you to understand how those work together. The funding of the depreciation comes right back into the system. We just keep rolling forward year after year after year, so we upgrade our assets over time. Now, there's upgrades that we can do as far as maintenance, okay, and renovation, if you will, and that sometimes at a certain point in an asset's life, you can't really invest anymore. You have to replace it in total. So, but the more money that you can invest in your maintenance along the way, you extend or prolong the life of that utility asset. So that's part of the whole program that we do as far as asset management within the organization. So I just wanted to pause and talk about that for a moment. Additionally, I wanted to say that we have 144 miles of water line of various compositions. So keep that in mind as well. So truly a goal for our organization is, especially once we understand what the criticality is of these water lines, and we'll have that data later this year to help us roll into next year's program, we will want to look at replacing or upgrading a certain percentage of those lines, so that over a X year period, whether it be 30 years, for example, let's just pick a number, we do a certain percentage every year of that, so that we're constantly upgrading our system and extending that life. So, thank you. I just want to pause on that. And the same holds true for the sewer system. And you can use that same methodology for any facilities. That's pretty much how we attack everything that we're doing here. And that's why the board's aware of, especially during your tours, that with our 80-year-old facility, our water plant, that's something that has to be on the schedule as well, so we can look at that replacement in total coming up in the next 15 or 20 years.
So this water line replacement program, you would work with your utility crew supervisors to determine what, I'm thinking 144 miles of line. You can't go out and inspect them all yourself.
No, we would.
It's a joint effort.
So we work with our staff and determine where we've had the most water line breaks, where we're having the most problems. And also with the upcoming AIA project, we are going to be doing some computer modeling to project where we anticipate we have failures in the future due to the age and material of the lines that we have.
Okay.
So there's a method to putting this together, and we're doing what we can.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so under the wastewater treatment facility, We've got, the first three projects there are major treatment components to the plant. We're showing the digester 1 and 2. I'm sure you remember us upgrading digesters 3 and 4. Well, we drained digesters 1 and 2, and the pipes look the same in 1 and 2 as they did in 3 and 4 before we did the project. So that's something that definitely needs to be worked on in the next couple of years. We've got the chemical storage tank replacement project, which we've discussed at recent board meetings, and then we also have some issues with our clarifier number 3, and that needs a major overhaul. We're also showing the SCADA upgrades here every 5 years, and then additional concrete rehab at the facility. Moving on to the water towers, we currently have 5 water towers that have solar-powered mixers that are problematic. They're not working right now. We're calling this just a solar mixer replacement program, where we want to go in and spend money to replace those solar mixers and put in either new solar mixers or electric mixers at those towers. So all 5 of those would be done at the same time. Then the last item here is a new water tower to take the place of the 1942 water tower that's located across the road from the water treatment plant. That tower is 80 years old. It was built in 42. So it's about another 10 years, and we'll need that to be replaced. And that's where we're showing that at year 10 of this.
Do we have 10 years?
Based on our condition reports that we do, yes. So we also have an additional program that sits within the operating budget, and we called that out earlier, that we spend $100 and some thousand on annual maintenance of our water towers. And that includes interior, exterior evaluations. Sometimes there's exterior repairs that have to be done. So it's an ongoing maintenance program for us. But we have some flexibility to move these dates around based on inspections that we'll have over the next couple of years as well. And the master plan that Mark talked about at the top of the page here, developing our master plan is going to be important to figure out over the next 10 years how we bring in other projects as far as a clarifier, a clear well, any other equipment that we have to put on site on that campus.
I did get an alert last week, as a matter of fact, on renewable energy grants that the governor's offering. So the solar mixer replacement program might come in under that.
Yeah, I saw the email when you sent that, and we'll definitely look into that.
I sent it to you too? Yeah, okay.
Okay, next up is the wastewater collection system, and you can see under the sewer rehab program. As I mentioned before, we just have a line item in some of these years where we're just putting money there, allocating to replace or rehab sewer lines that are not yet identified. But we do have 7 projects here that we have identified as sewer project areas. This document is just a 1-page document now, but I do have detailed maps that show where these are located. Most of these are within Butner, where we've got the oldest pipes, and that's where we have most of the issues based on the AIA and also from our field staff recommendations on where we need to make replacements. Then at the bottom, you see there's 3 projects that fall under a manhole replacement program. Our staff has identified multiple manholes throughout our system that are just like everything else, 80 years old and failing, and we just need to go out and replace those. So we've got, I believe, 5 manholes that we're going to try to do at one time as one program. The last section is the lift stations and force mains. So we've got, we're showing a lift station improvement program. It's a basic program that will encompass fencing and generators. We've identified 4 sites right now that do not have a fence or a generator. So this program will focus on adding that to the sites. That's a pretty standard thing that all lift stations should have, is a fence for security and safety, and then a generator for backup power. Then we're also showing some money going to the lift station asset inventory program. That's something that I anticipate happening next year, and that program, or that asset inventory for the lift stations, will probably develop more upgrade projects that we need to do at our lift stations. So,
And we would go outside for the assessment?
yes.
Okay.
So that's a very quick run through of the projects. I guess before we get to the lower section of this spreadsheet, do you have any questions about any of the projects that I mentioned?
I'm gonna ask a question. I know this is gonna come up when one of our commissioners sees this. Where do fire hydrants fall in this?
Oh, yeah.
Fire hydrant maintenance is just, it's not really a CIP, it's more of a service within
But
our operating budget.
don't we have a few that need to be replaced?
But it's inherent to our operations, not so much a CIP where we were gonna go out and replace a program's worth of valves or hydrants
Okay,
through
all
here
right.
as well. So if
So
we were gonna
just
go
a
out and
service,
replace,
not a-
if we were gonna do a 50 hydrant or 100 hydrant replacement program, you
Yeah,
may
then
see
it would
something
be.
in here
Right.
related to that, but there's nothing in here
Okay.
as far as that type of project
Okay.
for this. So, Mark, before you get to the bottom section, talking about target CIP budget plus some carryover, Richard, do you have any comments about anything that we've talked about above?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Another thing just for the committee, as Mark mentioned, he has a lot of detailed information supporting this summary sheet. We're also taking steps here during the next 8 months to bring all of this data into a different software package where all that information will be at our fingertips basically to see all the details, and we'll be able to share those booklets more readily with the committee members here as well as the public as far as what we're doing with our CIP programs and the coordination of that as well, because one thing that we have to keep in mind here when we manage these programs in the field is that if we're replacing pipes down streets, we have to make sure the communities understand what our schedule is for any paving that's going on, any concrete repairs, coordination with intersection upgrades, those type of things. So we've got that as well. All right, Mark, why don't you take us through the items at the bottom of the page, starting at target CIP budget plus carryover.
Okay, so the first line that you see there is, as Scott mentioned, target CIP budget. So as we mentioned earlier, the funding of depreciation, that money goes into the capital, the designated capital fund balance. So it's somewhere around $2.1 million a year. So that's what that first number is the $2.1 million that goes into that fund. The carryover portion is if there's any of that $2.1 million that is not spent in 1 year, it's going to carry over. So that first row is just a continuing total of starting with the 2.1 million for the year and then adding to it how much carryover you had from the previous years. We have the next row is emergency project funding goal. So this is just saying we're going to hold back $250,000 that if we have unexpected pump failures or unexpected capital needs that just pop up that do not fit in one of these other areas, that's money that we would hold in reserve to pay for projects like that. So the available CIP project funding, that is just subtracting the emergency project funding goal. So the emergency funds of $250,000, subtract that from the available 2.1 million of designated capital fund balance. You're left with $1,850,000 of CIP money or CIP project funding for this first fiscal year. The next row just shows the total fiscal year project cost. So if you sum all the projects from the FY 23-24 list above this, it's $1,798,500 is the estimated cost for those projects. And then when the last row shows the carryover funding of $51,500. So basically we're spending all but $51,500 of that available $1.85 million. And then that number just carries across all 10 of these columns from fiscal year 23-24 to 32-33. Are there any questions on that?
It must feel good to have this organization.
It does, very much so. It's going to feel even better when we get it done annually, and it's quite a heavy lift. Now, just keep in mind that in addition to Mark being on board, that we have a utility engineer that's on board working for us as well. His name is Dan Owens, and Dan will be spearheading a lot of these projects for us as well. You can imagine there's going to be a lot of coordination that's necessary to put these projects out, have them built throughout the year. All these projects do not go out at the same time.
Right.
We'll push out certain projects, especially some of the more costly ones, such as the chemical storage tank replacement, where I think that we already have pretty much all the engineering work done. We're just waiting for to issue that work and start that construction. So point being that there may be some variations in some of these projects that we cannot get accomplished just based on current pricing, but we'll manage that throughout the year to see which projects we let out, which ones we can't get done, and then we'll adjust our schedule to match that. I think what's important here as well is to mention the emergency project funding goal at 250. We thought that was a good place to start. We may increase that, decrease that a little bit here as we get this first schedule set, but I think that if you look at the project, the emergency project we're working on currently with the 36-inch pipe, quite an expense there. Previous years we've had $350,000 for digester emergency repairs, so we're kind of in that ballpark. So we thought it was a good idea at least to have that placeholder in there for us. So that's our schedule, our program summary. Again, we are not looking at this point to incorporate a detailed CIP booklet into the budget, just simply the summary sheet. But I also want to mention that we have a companion project, a couple of companion projects that need the CIP. And Mark's going to tell us about that. One is the USDA loan application we're working for. The other one is the system development fee, 5-year review of our fees. So Mark, you want to talk a little bit about that? Talk about the USDA loan application for the I-85 project, please.
Okay, so within the next 30 days, we plan to have the USDA funding application submitted. One of the requirements for that funding is that we have a 10-year CIP adopted. Obviously, as of today, we don't have that. So this should get us to where we need to be to check that box for the USDA application. The system development fee, so everyone is aware of the SDF that we charge. Anytime somebody makes a new connection to the water sewer system, they have to pay the system development fees. That system development fee is required by the state to be updated every five years. That's about November of this year is 5 years. So when you calculate what those system development fees are, those fees are based on capital projects that you have for expansion projects. Without a CIP, we have no projects, no cost to tie back to an SDF. So this table that you see here will be used, all of these projects, the projects that are going to expand the system, the costs associated with those projects will be used in that calculation to give us an accurate system development fee, something that we can charge that money can go back into to fund these projects.
Is this based on our 90% depreciation?
That is correct.
Oh, good. And we're meeting it. Yay!
And again, you can see how that money comes right back into the system for our CIP. And that's the entire idea. Okay. Well, very good. If no further questions, Mark, thank you so much for putting that schedule together for us.
Yeah, having a good visual is good to have. Puts it into perspective.
Next item is the schedule for budget approval. Turning to page 35. So as the committee is aware, our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. We have our target date for board approval of the budget is the May board meeting. We have to have a budget approved before the last day of June, basically the last day of our fiscal year. We set up a May approval schedule with a backup for June, and you can see on the table below that just a couple of the items that we've completed here so far as our budgeting internally. If you look at the February-March target date schedule, we have yet to, let's see, we're completing our finance committee meetings. We have none scheduled beyond today, but we can talk about that at the end if you think that there's an additional meeting necessary. We have to draft the budget, will be finalized by staff coming up, and then draft budget booklets will be provided to the board members, and the required budget public hearing notice is published. And we are poised to have that published here coming up. So at the April 11th, 2023 regular board meeting, we will discuss the review and discuss the budget recommendation from the Finance Committee, and then we will also hold the required public hearing for the draft budget and the rate schedule and the CIP. And then we look at the May 9th meetings for the board to adopt the budget, and if they wouldn't for some reason, then we have June 13th regular board meeting, where the board can adopt the budget. And if it doesn't happen at that meeting, then special meetings will be required
Alright.
until we actually pass that. So, the budget. Any questions about the schedule in front of us?
No?
Any comments, Richard, from you on the schedule, or anything that we're preparing?
No, I think we're right on target, assuming we don't have any further meetings on the budget. We're right on target with the February, March schedule and having the public hearing.
Okay, very good. Next item on the agenda, other financial topics. And the topic that we have scheduled today is the recommendation for award of contract for auditing services for fiscal year 23-24.
Does that mean?
That's you.
That's
Yep.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
as you know, every 3 to 5 years, we typically try to go out for a new proposal RFP for audits. That's kind of the standard. We've had the existing auditor. 2022 was the last year was the third year of that audit contract. So it was a good time at the third year, this becoming the fourth year, to go out and look at audit services again. The other thing that kind of prompted us to do it at the 3-year mark rather than coming to the Finance Committee with a recommendation to wait to the 4th or 5th, like we have in past years, is starting with this fiscal year we're in now, the 22-23 fiscal year, and the 2 subsequent years we expect a single audit. We've discussed that before because of the ARPA funding that we've got. So we thought this was a perfect time to go out. Plus there's some conflicting guidance on whether we were required to, with ARPA funding, go out for a new bid, even if we'd just gotten one. So we thought it safe to go and just do that. So we updated the committee on that previously. So the results of that RFP proposal is, I'll just kind of hit on what we did. We basically took the LGC's list of auditors within North Carolina that are either registered with LGC or have submitted audits to the LGC. We took that list and weeded out or filtered it down to get rid of anybody who said they didn't do authorities. Some places focus on cities or counties or certain types of entities. We filtered it down for that, and any that said they don't do audits in the central region of North Carolina. So if they were strictly eastern, western regions and didn't service our region, we cut those out. So we sent those RFPs out. We only got 2 proposals back. Those 2 proposals were from Winston Winds Creech Evans and Company, which was our current auditor, our past auditor. The other was from a firm, RHCPA's PLLC. They have 3 offices, one I believe in High Point, Greensboro, and Charlotte. And I think the audit proposal had the main audit team operating out of High Point, I believe. You see Scott and I both, as the review committee, reviewed the proposals independently. It came in 2 sections, the first section being qualifications, so we reviewed those sections first, and then we reviewed the pricing after reviewing the qualifications. I think we felt both firms, and Scott, I'll give you a chance in a minute to chime in if you think that's not what happened, but I think we both came to the consensus that both firms were highly qualified and capable of doing our audit. We didn't see any compelling arguments for or against either one. So I think we decided that our recommendation, you see the price in there, Winston Winds Creech and Evans, I'll go through the pricing briefly. Their pricing for this current fiscal year, and these are both assuming single audit, is $8,900, with the subsequent 2 years, which are not locked in, but they stick to the proposal pretty closely usually, $9,050 and $9,200 for fiscal year 24-25. In contrast, the fiscal year 22-23 proposal by RHCPA's is $15,870 plus travel costs, which they estimate to be not to exceed $4,570. Second year would be $17,460. Third year would be $19,205, and both of those years have a travel allowance of up to $4,570 as well. So after reviewing both proposals, Scott and I decided that we've been happy with the Winston Winds Creech Evans and Company audit services that they've provided for the past several years. Carlene Evans, as you know, is kind of the primary auditor, the lead auditor for our audit, and has been for several years. We've been very pleased with their services and the relationship we've had with those auditors. And considering the price difference, our recommendation is that we award the contract for fiscal year 22-23 to Winston Williams, Creech, Evans and Company, with the intent that we will also, in the RFP, it said that we would try to stick with the same auditor for 3 years, with the intent that we will also be recommending to the board that we award contracts each year to those for 2 more years. So basically, we're recommending them for 3 years, but we'll do a year-by-year contract to the board, of course. Any questions on that?
So, the first year I was in the finance department, we did a request for the auditors, I believe.
Mhm.
And I think at that time Carly Evans was the auditor who did us. Aren't the audit firms required to switch to a different auditor to review a company that stays with them that long?
No, there is no requirement. You're asking if you're required every so often to switch auditors so that a new set of eyes.
Yeah,
on
not the firm, just the auditor in the firm.
Oh,
There is no requirement for that. A lot of firms do that as an internal control function to
Yeah.
us, so they'll reassign a new audit partner every so many years.
Okay,
A lot of the smaller firms do not,
okay,
because they do such few audits that then you'd have a new audit partner coming in and having to redo all the work from the prior year
Yeah.
that auditor did to become familiar with the entity. So I think we discussed in the first meeting some of the numbers of how many we sent out and how many we received back.
Yeah, I
And you see we
remember
got
that.
only
Yeah.
2.
yeah,
We were concerned, as you know from sitting on your own boards, auditors are few and far between these days, so they're not bidding on audits. The LGC at the conference, spring conference 2 weeks ago, there was a big discussion in the LGC session about how many audits right now haven't been submitted yet for last fiscal year, and part of the reason is because auditors have pulled out of the business.
it's too expensive, the insurance is expensive.
It's expensive, it's become so difficult as far as independence, so you can't do journal entries, you can't advise the client anymore, things of that nature. And a lot of smaller entities, auditors historically would help them write the financial statements or do adjusting journal entries at year end, and you can no longer do that with the new independence rules. So a lot of small firms pulled out of the auditing side and said, well, we'll go help them get their books in order before the auditor comes in. So they've switched services, there's less liability there.
Okay.
But there is no requirement for that.
Okay,
And yes, we had, when I first came on board, it was William L. Stark and Company. And then Winston Williams and Creech did it 1 year. The year I came on board, they were already contracted for the audits. Phillips, Dorsey, Thomas, Ward, and Bradford out of Henderson did it for 6 years, I believe.
okay,
Since then, it has been Winston Williams and Creech.
okay.
She does bring a different team of associate auditors with her.
Yeah,
But
so
she
it's a
has-
different set of eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say one thing that will help you with their internal, as far as their peer review. They do have, so you have the lead auditor who comes and does the work, writes the report, does all the audit field work. But with Winston Williams, Creech, and Evans, and most other firms, they have an audit review partner. So then that partner does switch back and forth sometimes. So I think Tara Reed reviews our audit some years behind Carlene. So she audits Carlene's audit in essence. The other years Jennifer Reese does.
Okay,
So they do have a second set of eyes, and they do alternate those eyes.
okay,
I hope that clarifies.
that's it.
So I guess in closing, Scott, unless you have anything else, unless the Finance Committee feels strongly otherwise, that will be the recommendation we will bring to the board in the April board meeting, along with the audit contract for Winston Williams, Creech, Evans and Company.
Absolutely,
Okay?
I agree with that.
yeah,
The other one is,
double,
yeah, more than double.
double plus travel.
And
All right, very good. Thank you, Richard.
my point's not that far.
Next item on the agenda, comments, recommendations from the Finance Committee members on the draft FY 23-24 budget. So we're looking for your comments or recommendations in terms of what we presented to you as far as the total budget package. That includes the operating budget, that includes the rates, fees, and charges, and also includes the CIP schedule.
No, I mean, I really appreciate the capital improvement plan to have a visual so we can see
Mhm.
the next 10 years where we're going. But other than that, I think everything was presented to my liking. I don't have any questions or concerns.
Okay,
And the CIP will also help the board in
Yeah.
future decisions. I mean, because you can refer back to it and say, we had quoted 250 or 2.1 million and we only spent this much
Right.
out of the year. So I think this is an excellent tool. I know you've wanted to do a CIP program before the USDA required it.
correct.
And I think this is going to help the board in a lot of their decision-making and going forward, because we have a reference tool that we can go back to.
Exactly, and a lot of our legislative memos, we refer presently to, this is currently in our budget.
Right.
And you'll see that with projects we bring to the board to say this is currently on our CIP, and it aligns with our strategic plan and other programs. So we can keep track of that
Right.
as far as what we're doing. So I think what I hear from the Finance Committee is that you are satisfied with the information we've presented,
Yes.
and you're not authoring or issuing any changes to what we presented to our
No.
budget. Is
No.
that correct?
That is correct.
The budget is, looks great.
Nope, I don't have any changes.
Okay. Very good. So we will look to the chair of the Finance Committee at the April board meeting. You'll have an
Talk all the
opportunity.
other board members into signing the dot.
You'll have an opportunity to speak, obviously, to make your recommendation of the budget, if you will.
Yes.
It was presented to the rest of the board members. So, great, thank you. We appreciate that. We put a lot of hard work into this budget. Richard starts basically in September of last year to get us prepared for the budget. Our department heads do a lot of work during the holidays to get the budget ready so that we can have these meetings in February and March. So great job, team. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. So we celebrate on June 30th, right? Kind of like New Year's Eve for a new fiscal budget. We do, right, Richard?
That's
So-
year in, I can't
Yeah, you
celebrate.
know,
Oh, he gets
Yeah. And then he starts the process in September all the way
All
around.
over
So,
again. Yeah.
looks good. So
So we will schedule a public hearing for the April meeting as well.
that is correct. In fact, we're already poised with that. We've already contacted the newspaper. We have the script. We have some days coming up that a couple of Fridays it'll be advertised. We have a requirement that we have to post that at least 10 days prior because it's a special meeting. It's a required meeting. So that will actually be held at the April meeting. We started, I think just a year or two ago, holding the public hearing at the April meeting, for example, and then looking towards a budget approval at the following meeting. So that's what we have. So we have a public hearing in April. We collect comments. We review this with the board. There's an opportunity for the board to discuss, approve any changes to the budget. We make those modifications, then we present that budget to the board in May as our final draft that the board will look at.
So the proposed budget will go online for our customers when our agenda goes out, or will it be sooner?
Actually, let me ask Richard. Richard, when do you anticipate that you'll have the final budget books available?
I think in the internal budget schedule, we have March 29th
Okay.
as the date that it will be distributed to the board members, and I believe in prior years, that's when the secretary puts it on the website, makes it available to the public. So I anticipate having it ready middle of next week, well, in advance of the 29th.
Okay.
Just so that our public hearing can be attended and people have time to review it. That's why I was
Yeah,
asking.
and we are required by statute that when we release it to the board, we have to make it public at the same
at the
time.
same
So we
time.
issue everything on the same date basically and say, it's now available and here's the public hearing dates that are coming up. So everyone has time to attend those should they desire to.
And I'm sure our PIO is going to make it interactive so that there'll be dancing little SGWASA members on the page.
Could be. I'm not
Maybe
sure.
after we
know.
approve
I
the
haven't-
budget,
I
you
haven't-
can put little dancing
I
men on
haven't talked to
never
her
know.
yet about that, but we'll figure that out, so. All right.
Scott, you have done a great job in your hiring of staff since you've been here. And I can say that because you and I started the same time.
Well, that leaves me right.
Well,
out.
wait, I know, right?
She's getting
And you
there.
must be a good, now you didn't let me
You
finish.
should add in retention
Yeah.
staff.
Well,
Yeah,
and you must be
retention.
doing a good job because Richard hasn't run for the door.
No, he
And
hasn't.
thank God we have Richard too.
No, he has, but I pulled him back several times, so.
I get almost out the door.
That's right, he almost gets there.
Turns
But thank
back
you.
around.
No, I appreciate that. No, we've got a great team
Yeah, it
all
is
around
good.
us.
We do, we really do.
Including our board members, so thank you for your leadership
Yeah.
as well in supporting us in what we do.
And Richard, I'm glad we didn't send you back to the drawing board 3 times this year.
You and me both.
So,
That makes it a lot easier to meet those
Yeah,
deadlines.
I'll ask my team if there's any final remarks that you have, or any comments that you would like to make to the Finance Committee, and then I'll throw it back to the Finance Committee for any final remarks. Nothing? Okay, back to the committee members, and the chair is sitting over here as well, so.
I mean, it's just, everybody's done a fantastic job, so thank you all very much. It's been a easy process, and the way you've outlined it has been, makes it easier for us to review and absorb the information, so I appreciate that very much. So, but that's it for me.
I just hope I'm here next year to do this again.
Okay, great.
I don't know, but, we'll see, but for the years I have served on the Finance Committee, I've loved it, and hopefully, if I get reelected, I can be reappointed to the Finance Committee, because I will volunteer
Very good.
to work with Linda and you guys. You guys are great.
Very good.
It's been very easy.
Yeah, just like to say thanks to all of you for putting this together, and, you've got a really good template here. And you could pretty much take this same template and use it for most any other organization to plan.
He's taking it to the county.
It's a great planning tool.
He's taking it to
and,
Drew.
Good, great example, and I really appreciate it. Thank y'all.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is adjournment.
We already did that.
Well,
What?
before you
We
got
did
here,
that
yeah. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. We stand adjourned at 10:31 a.m.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you so
Good.
much.